Thank you very much for making a date on the marketplace. Let's now settle for our very first story, where inflation rate for the month of December 2018 marginally increased to 9.4% as compared with 9.3% in November. Transport subsector is said to be one of the key drivers of the current inflation rise. Here's acting government statistician David Combat, who's been explaining what accounted for this slight year-on-year increase.
Components of transport. He didn't see much increase in fuel in December, and why transport. If you look at, for example, the Upper West region, we see that consistently, whether there's a price increase in the fuel, there's a change in fuel price or not, the inflation rate for transport is always the cost of the increase in their rates. And spare parts is also one thing that has to be looked at. It is it's not fuel, but the car owners, transport operators would usually also increase their fares if they see that the cost of spare parts is going up. So I think these are the factors that are accounting for the fuel prices. Didn't seem to have gone up, but as we explained, it's not only fuel that constitutes what transport owners spend on spare parts. You hear the Aboso kind of people, talking about, and some of it is cumulative. Sometimes when prices increase, the fuel price increase marginally, they don't increase their fares. Then it increases again, they don't increase. Then at some point they come, we are increasing our fares because cumulatively, even though there were marginal increases, it is now affecting our operations. Okay, so I think that is what has caused this.
Help us understand what happens. We expecting a revised CPI.
We are working hard to have it released next month. So for the January 2019 figure would be based on the revised figures.
Any updates on the census?
Yes, we are preparing, and government has given approval for us to conduct the census in 2020. What we are doing now is updating our enumeration areas. So we have 40 teams of mappers, cartographers on the field, updating the enumeration area maps. The current enumeration area maps were those we did for the 2010 census, so there's a need to update it before the next census. Otherwise, you assign somebody an area and it's so large that he's unable to complete. And so we have finished. We are working on that. We finished with the 3 northern regions. We are now in Ashanti and Brona-Ahafo, and gradually, coming down, and hope to finish the field work by September 2019. And then we would now be working with the office work.
Meanwhile, in the regional distribution, 5 regions, Upper West, Brona-Ahafo, Western, Ashanti and Northern, recorded inflation rates above the national average of 9.4%. Moving on to other stories, the Bui Power Authority will this January commence work on Ghana's first solar plant to feed into the national grid. CEO of the Bui Power Authority, Fred Owari, told Odilia Ntiamwa all the necessary permits needed to commence the 50-megawatt plant have been acquired.
We got our construction permit just last Tuesday, 2 days ago. And so with that, we can now move in and start working with the first 10 megawatts. That would be the first time that you would have solar energy injected onto the national grid. We've done all the things that we need to do, all the technical studies, the feasibility studies, the plans. We've had the permits from EPA, from Energy Commission, the ministries. We've done all that. Now that we have the construction permit, we should go into actual construction, which would mean once we go to the land, we clear the whole place and we start the civil works. We would time it so that, well, fortunately for us, the rains won't come till about May or so. And so within the next 4 months, we hope to have accomplished all the civil works, lay all the cables, and then the transmission lines to the switchyard. We are optimistic that latest third quarter of the year, we should be injecting energy into the system.
What about the Sino-Hydro arrangement?
Well, it's part of it. It's us, BPA, building up to 50. Sino-Hydro is also looking to 50. Then we have another Ghanaian company, Strategic Security Systems, also 50. With the interconnecting transmission grid impact studies which have been made will not allow all the 150 at one go. So this will be spaced out. And so once we start, we think Sino-Hydro might also come in, getting to the end of the year, and 3 years maybe about the same time, or next 2020.
So live on the marketplace, let's move on to one of our top stories today. The Public Interest and Accountability Committee, PIAC, has published its semi-annual report on the management of petroleum revenues for the first half of 2018. This is in fulfillment of Section 556 of the Petroleum Revenue Management Act, PRMA 2011 Act 815. PIAC, however, says even though Ghana National Gas Company, GNGC, received over $46 million as proceeds from gas revenues, it made no payments to the GNPC in respect of gas supplied for which no gas receipts were realized or were released into the Petroleum Holding Funds. I've been joined in the studio right now by the technical manager of PIAC, Mark Ajiman, to throw some more light on aspects of the report and for which we really need to interrogate. Good afternoon, sir. Welcome to the marketplace.
Good afternoon, and thank you for
All right, now, one major concern is the fact that you claim that you did not receive adequate information from the Ministry of Finance well ahead of time for you to include it in this report. What exactly happened?
Thank you. Statutorily, our semi-annual report is supposed to come out on the 15th of September every year, and the annual one comes out on the 15th of March the following year.
Okay.
So what we usually do is that we have about 11 or 12 reporting institutions that we analyze their data in our report. So we send out, for the semi-annual report, we send out requisition letters
to the various institutions
around July.
Okay.
And give them a month to respond. Some of the institutions have been quite prompt in their response. ENI, for instance, Bank of Ghana, Ghana Gas, Cosmos, Talo, and their likes, and Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund. So the Ministry of Finance, we usually request two data. One has to do with revenue, what was realized into the Petroleum Holding Fund for the period. And then one has to do with expenditure, what the monies were used for. So the issue in question, when we sent out the letter, they responded by providing data on revenue without expenditure. So after some verbal interactions with some staff at the ministries, we decided to send a formal letter reminding them of the delay, what the delay is also causing to us for not meeting our statutory deadline.
Couldn't you have obtained this information from the Bank of Ghana alternatively?
When it comes to expenditure, it's solely done by the Ministry of Finance.
Right.
The budget division of the Ministry of Finance does expenditure on behalf of government.
So what exactly did the Ministry of Finance say or indicate for which there was this delay?
There were no formal response. Even acknowledgement of our letters didn't come.
Okay.
So we met at Parliament because the Finance Committee of Parliament sit on our report. So we met at Parliament to review our 2017 annual report. And Parliament being the institution we are responsible to as an oversight body, we put it before Parliament that this is the challenge we are having with the Ministry of Finance. There, the Chief Director was there, and then a Deputy Finance Minister was there, Honorable Abina Osei-Asare.
Right.
There, they actually promised to release the data to us just after that meeting. We waited for some weeks, the data wasn't forthcoming.
Okay. Let's look at highlights of the report, because I believe the report is a broad one. Now, one point here says, for the first time, the Ghana Stabilization Fund received more than the annual budget funding amount and is the highest since the commencement of petroleum production in Ghana.
That should be good news.
Exactly. I mean, how did it come by?
Usually, the government budget for the annual budget funding amount.
Yes, so if 70% of petroleum receipts go into
Yes, after you've taken that of GNPCs.
Okay, sure.
There is 70% of it.
Okay.
So if, say, this year government decides to spend $200 million through the annual budget funding amount, what they do is that they disburse those money in quarterly. So every quarter will be 50 million.
Okay, to the ABFA.
To the ABFA.
Okay.
So the movement is 200 million, and we get more money, excess money. You just put it into the stabilization fund according to the law.
Okay.
So the excess money, let's say this year we projected that we'll get $800 million from petroleum activities, and the government end up getting $1 billion. That is excess. So after distributing to the ABFA, whatever is left as excess is put into the stabilization fund. And the essence of that fund is to stabilize the economy in terms of unexpected shocks.
What happened to the 30% contribution? Because I know 70% goes into ABFA,
Yes.
30% is shared between the stabilization fund and the heritage fund.
Yes.
So
So the 30% is also, as I said, it's also projected. So 30% will go to the 30%, 21% goes to the stabilization, and 9% goes to the heritage fund.
Exactly.
So as I said, whatever excess due to unforeseen realize of higher revenues from petroleum activities, that excess goes to the stabilization fund.
Okay. So you had an excess of what from ABFA?
From the ABF, if you look at the distribution to the ABFA and then the heritage, the stabilization fund is in excess of about $200 million.
What's been happening? Because last year also we also had a stabilization fund proceeds not being used or utilized.
Yes.
Some huge amount. What's happening?
It wasn't actually stabilization. It was the ABFA.
ABFA,
it was about 402 million Ghana cedis.
That's significant.
Yeah, that is huge. We probed the ministry, and their response was that what they decided to do was that they were auditing some contracts to ascertain value for money and other stuff.
Okay.
So upon completion of this audit process, then the money will be utilized. So that money were utilized in 2018.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now let's look at this other point.
But because we didn't get the expenditure report, we couldn't verify whether they were utilized or not.
All right. That's unfortunate.
Yes.
Now, so even though Ghana National Gas Company received over $46 million as proceeds from gas revenues, it made no payment to GNPC, for which there was no onward transmission to the petroleum holding funds. Yeah. What did you find out as that cause?
Yeah, you see, this issue is part of the broader energy sector debt cycle. Okay. Yeah, GNPC is the national gas aggregator. They take all the gas and give it to Ghana, GC to process, sell, and then pay them back. Okay. And the processed derivatives, we have land gas that we use for power generation, and LPG and the likes. Chunk of it goes to VRA. VRA, upon production of gas, ECG doesn't pay VRA. So VRA is unable to pay Ghana Gas for Ghana Gas to pay GNPC. So it's a cycle.
Cycle, exactly.
And as at June 2018, via the total debt to Ghana Gas was around $873 million, out of which about more than 90%.
Even after efforts by government to settle some of these things.
Yes, the ESLA, I know you are talking of the ESLA. Sure. VRA is getting some money from ESLA, and the intent was that since government is cushioning the financial pressure on VRA will have been in the position to pay some of these debts. Okay. But then it's not forthcoming. Ghana Gas is not receiving payment from VRA, and therefore they are not also paying GNPC for GNPC to deposit the money into the Petroleum Holding Fund. Ghana Gas's response was that because VRA is not paying them, they don't have operational funds. So whatever little money they collect through the sale of derivatives, like LPG and condensate, that is what they use to run the operation.
Is it going to undermine receipts into the holding funds, or because we have excess of ABFA coming into the holding funds, is going to actually balance?
It's actually going to, because as I said, by June 2018, what's supposed to come into the holding fund from Ghana Gas is about $275 million. Okay. That money is locked up somewhere. And it's locked up through the indebtedness of VRA to Ghana Gas.
Now, we can go on and on, but we have little time. But let's touch on one major recommendation. You are saying that, the Minister of Finance should provide explanation for the exercise of discretionary capping. Yeah. What do you mean by that?
The law mandates the Minister of Finance to cap the stabilization fund and take whatever excess over the cap for into either the ABFA or either deposited through the sinking fund or the contingency fund. Currently, the Minister of Finance has capped it around $300 million with no explanation. It's arbitrary capping. What we are saying that the Ministry of Finance should provide a justifiable reason for capping it at a certain amount. Because whatever excess can go into the ABFA. And don't forget that the stabilization fund, if it is not used, it accrues interest, which comes back to the state. So they should just provide the justifiable reason why they are capping it at a certain amount for all Ghanaians to understand why they are capping it. Because we can wake up one day and the minister will cap it at $1.
Okay. All right.
And take whatever excess out. And also don't forget that the law says that when we exhaust all our petroleum resources, we should merge the Heritage Fund and the Stabilization Fund and call it the Ghana Sovereign Wealth Fund. So we should be mindful of how much is always at the stabilization at any given point. We should be very mindful. Because, as I said, what if they wake up and cap it at $1?
Okay. So what are you going to do now that this report is out and there are some discrepancies?
Yeah, what we usually... These are actually not discrepancies because we usually have a validation session with all these institutions before we bring our report back. So it's a factual information that we have in our report. So what we do is that we will meet Parliament. We distribute our report to the media and to institutions, identifiable institutions across the country. We have town hall meetings to inform Ghanaians what their petroleum revenues have been managed, how they've been managed so far. So we are going to go on this. And then very soon we will send out another letters out for the publication of our 2018 annual report.
Many thanks for your time. Mark Ajimai is the technical director at the Public Interest Accountability Committee. We'll be shedding some more light on the 2018 half-year report of the committee, which has been released by PIAC. Away from that, imagine as a farmer producing cassava 5 times bigger than the average size and improving yields by over 400%. Well, this has been made possible by the Crop Research Institute with the introduction of the Banchehima variety, a high-yielding and disease-resistant variety, with Ghana being the 6th largest producer worldwide. The innovation can improve its ranking. Karen Dodo visited the Crop Research Institute in Kumasi recently and has filed this report.
Although popular as a local staple food, the country is yet to exploit the full potential of the crop for industrial purposes and export. Though available, cassava improvements in varieties have virtually been non-existent. This is where the Crop Research Institute comes in. As one of the 13 institutes under the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, the Crop Research Institute has a broad research mandate covering food and industrial crops, including cereals, legumes, roots and tubers, including cassava. With research fields such as these, the Institute multiplies the improved varieties they produce for farmers.
This year we had requests from about 3 farmers who are into the one district, one factory.
Research fellow in charge of the cassava breeding program, Professor Joe Menu, explains that although Ghana is one of the largest producers in the world, the local variety commonly grown has low yields, therefore leaving room for more.
And you know, in Ghana, most of us eat fufu 3 times a day. And so we have to improve upon our local varieties. And our local varieties, we know they are good for fufu, but the yields are very low because of the African cassava mosaic. So what we normally do is we collect these germplasm from different parts of the country, bring them to crop research here, and then we marry them with our improved varieties. We do crosses, we call hybridization, and then we introduce the good attributes that are in the materials to the local ones. 1, to improve upon them, 2, to increase the yields, and then 3, to make them resistant to the African cassava mosaic so that we can get them back to farmers. And it is through this process that the Institute has been able to, well, develop and release 18 out of the 26 improved varieties released in Ghana.
So this right here is one of the improved varieties of cassava. Now this is the Banchehima. Like you can see, the tubers indeed is a hema in the cassava family, because this is bigger than the usual cassava we know and heavier as well. So imagine a farmer getting this for just 1 stem. That's a whole lot for production and a whole lot even in terms of profit. I know some people back home who won't spare this cassava.
Based on certain attributes. Banchehima, for instance, is ready for harvesting after 12 months. And the yields go beyond 40 to 50 tons per hectare if you get good rains. But for now, we are encouraging farmers to go into irrigation. And once you have water throughout the year, then you can produce good quality cassava products for either home consumption or for processing into industrial uses.
By experimenting with other varieties from other countries, improved varieties are generated for the farmers to use. However, Professor Menu explains that even with improved varieties for planting, farmers need to practice good planting habits to really benefit from the effectiveness of the improved variety.
You see, most farmers think for cassava you can plant it anywhere, and so they produce their cassava in the west fields. Yes, cassava will do well even in conditions where the other crops like maize, rice and other crops will fail. But if you want good production, now it's for commercial purposes, and so you should use the best fields that you would use for your other crops like maize, cowpeas and all those things.
The cassava breeding program is one of the over 10 breeding programs under the Institute. Rice, maize, cowpea, soybeans, groundnut and other tuber breeding programs allow the Institute to multiply seed samples generated by them. This is done at the Biotechnology Laboratory. We are now here at the Biotechnology Lab. Now this is where all the magic happens for the whole institute. They do the testings and the research into seeds to generate good varieties for farmers to improve upon their yields. So follow me, let's go and see how everything happens here. The Biotechnology Laboratory is acclaimed as one of the best in Africa. With state-of-the-art equipment, researchers take in samples meant for propagation by farmers, then test and clean them for planting.
Okay, so this is the tissue culture facility that we have.
Dr. Ruth Premper is a research scientist here at the lab. She explains that with samples such as roots, stems and leaves, they are able to detect the yielding potential of the crop.
You know, with the vegetatively propagated crops, what happens is that because farmers always use cuttings or vines from the previous season to grow the next season, they are able to, in a way, they are able to accumulate pathogens, disease-causing organisms. So if the cuttings that you use is infected, it means that it's going to affect the yield.
Affect the next yield. Okay.
It's going to affect the yield. So this facility is mainly for the cleaning of those cuttings to make them free of viruses, so that they'll be clean.
Better yield. Okay.
Yes, to enhance the yield.
Okay. After thorough cleaning, the samples are planted in jars in a special media soil and observed, given the required temperature and essential nutrients for growth. All this is done at the tissue culture section.
After 6 weeks, the nutrients would have started depleting. Okay. So you have to change the medium. Okay. But then in changing the medium, you have to cut this into pieces. So you start with this. At the next one, you are going to get about 8 plantlets. Okay. That same 8 plantlets, each of them is going to multiply. So that is the rapid propagation system.
Okay. So here the plantlets go through various cleaning and rapid propagation to ensure that farmers have good planting materials to improve their yields. So all this is done to help the Crop Research Institute so that they can, in the end, help farmers to get more. After a couple of weeks of observation, the samples are then transferred to the screen house, where they are then introduced to harsher conditions to prepare them for the farms. The various samples, now grown into seedlings, are transplanted into soil beds. For samples that do not survive, they are discarded. At this stage, the seedlings are still monitored and fed with nutrients through a system called the aeroponics system.
These are young plantlets that have been grown here. What you can see here is that they are in the air. The roots are suspended in here.
Okay.
The roots are suspended in here. And you have this nutrient solution.
Okay.
That is connected to the pipes through it. So from time to time, it flashes nutrients. This contains nutrient solution. Okay. So just like the media that contains the nutrients, there is a nutrient solution in this drum. So from time to time, it flashes the nutrients around the roots. Okay. Okay. So, and that is how it's able to grow. because it's getting the nutrients from in here.
When the seedlings mature, they then produce seeds, which are then ready to be introduced to the open field. Breeding programs then multiply them and give them to farmers.
And that was a feature by Karen Dodu. Let's now cross over to the international front. And a leading global infrastructure firm, Global Infrastructure Partners, has announced that the World Bank president, Dr. Jim Yong Kim, will join its outfit as partner and vice chairman from February 1 this year. This was after Dr. Kim announced his surprise resignation 3 years ahead of his expiration of the contract.
According to the Global Infrastructure Partners, GIP, the leadership and vision that Dr. Kim brought to the World Bank, as well as his prior roles as president of Dartmouth College and director of the World Health Organization's HIV/AIDS department, speak for themselves. Dr. Kim's broad knowledge base, along with his first-hand, comprehensive experience of working with governments and institutions around the world, will provide very valuable insights. In addition, his previous involvement with infrastructure and the emerging markets and his expertise in environmental, social, and corporate governance issues will further expand the capabilities of the broad and diverse GIP leadership team. Dr. Kim says his previous experiences and recent years working at the World Bank have been rewarding efforts that have demonstrated how vital infrastructure development has become to the world. He welcomes the opportunity to work with GIP to be part of furthering this broad and critically important global mission. GIP has offices in New York, London, and Mumbai, with an affiliate in Sydney and portfolio company operations headquarters in Stamford, Connecticut.
And on that note, we wrap up this afternoon's edition of The Marketplace. It's been great having you on board. My name is Emmanuel Abuaji. Let's meet again same time tomorrow.